Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I have a new plugin, and this time it's not some kind of dither or semi-dither or acting like dither kind of thing. This one's by request. I have a user who's been asking for this for an awfully long time, so I set him up with a copy of it, and this is called Crystal. This is what came before bus colors, and it's got some unusual characteristics like bus colors is doing a sort of time domain thing where it morphs between different convolution impulses based on sort of sustained loudness value. But this is doing its time domain, it's doing morphing between convolution impulses based on every sample, which seems, and initially I thought that that was the way, that it would just be the same as a single convolution impulse. But on reflection, I learned that what it does is gives you slightly different saturation curves, sample by sample, based on, well, this is what bus colors came out of, and there's a whole bank of plugins back in the dawn of time called things like Neverland and API Calypse and Precious that used a earlier form of things, and some people think those sound the best of all. So I'm going to start bringing those out, and this is the one that the fellow wanted more than any of the others. The funny thing, however, is it doesn't have a convolution impulse like the other ones do. Rather than being a sample from some kind of waveform, this is a equalizer impulse. What it has for a personality control, which is where you put in the sample convolution-y thing, that's just a brick wall filter up around the Nyquist frequency. And that'll be whichever frequent sample rate you are, so it will adapt itself to higher frequencies and doesn't have a specific, it's not going for a specific sound, so it's more adaptable. This also has hardness control, and that, it turns out, is the missing algorithm for the long-lost new channel disaster. And let me briefly show you what this all sounds like rather than just talking and talking, because that's always annoying. So the idea is you turn this on, and you've got varying degrees of overload or distortion on it, and you've also got that personality control. And you might hear that it's causing maybe a little bit of a bump in gain, but also a sort of clarifying effect. I'll play with the personality control to demonstrate that. Without that, it sounds like less of a change, but so personality is doing something to the sound. It's a kind of, it's like a high roll-off filter, but it's a fairly steep one. And the way that the convolution affects it means it's doing something which I can't necessarily even predict how that works. However, what we'll do now is, you'll see I've got bit shift gain turned on. Let's turn it down good and hard so that we can turn up drive. As you can see, you can turn that up a lot. And you do have the output level. I could have done that way as well. Now we'll hear what hardness does as a control. And what hardness does is shown on this page. This is the idea. Hardness of 0 is super soft, kind of like the density algorithm. In fact, it is the density algorithm. Hardness of 1.0 is hard digital clipping. Between that, you're taking the point at which it starts to clip and making a nice little curve to smooth off where it goes. And this sounds like the greatest idea in the world. So, well, you'll hear what it does, and then I'll explain why it's not always desirable. Full hardness. Full softness. So, that's here. That's here. That's here. Now, the reason you might want to do something like that is because it's letting you put the body of the sound and the sort of grunginess on a slider. I'll demonstrate that a little bit more before explaining why you might not want to choose this. So a little drier there. It's a little fuller here. And we can even pull some of the gloss out of there with the personality control. And you'll note this is clipping at exactly 0. So it will work as a kind of final clip device as well. Now here's why this might be less than popular, at least here's why this wasn't popular when I added it to channel. Note how the softest version of this has a crossover point right in the middle, and the direction at which the curve is happening changes abruptly at that point. And I'll draw another line on there. The way hardness works is it is widening this linear area and then transitioning to the curve point when it goes beyond that linearity. It's basically doing a sort of subtract and add kind of shenanigan where it's reshaping that smooth saturation curve to be smaller and smaller. And though this does exactly what's desired in terms of having the voicing of the curve be reshaped, like you can dial in the amount of sort of fatness and thickness you're looking for, it's also causing an extra transition point in the middle of the swing of the waveform. In fact, maybe I can even demonstrate what that's like. I have a sine sweep setting over here, and that might be just what I need, provided I can make it be kind of regular. I'm going to want to pick a setting kind of in the middle here. We'll pick an area that's like this. See, it'll repeat. Personality won't do anything because that's only affecting high frequencies, so we can have it on or not. And as you can see, I can turn up the gain, causing it to become a higher frequency distortion, or straight up square wave. Since it's a smaller curve here, you hear the difference much more easily, whereas with this, you never hear a single point. I mean, it'll go loud enough to where you can get a full-on crank, but there's no individual point here because the curve is much broader. And so far, so good. But listen to what happens when I start to increase this a little bit from here. Hear that little edge in there? That's where you just hit this point. We start hearing it happen, and you can pick out when it's just beginning to come into effect. It's almost like hitting the full crank point with a square wave, but this is in the middle of the waveform, and that doesn't always sit well with people. Like, you can do this, but a listener will be able to hear this point. And that's not where your full clip is. That's in the middle of the wave. Let's do that some more. Even more so. See, as soon as you start touching this point, people can hear that, and then we start getting the full crank going on. So when you're doing an algorithm like this, and remember, I tried to replace the algorithm in channel, which is like full softness, with this, and it went very poorly. I had to roll the whole thing back. I brought it back in again for Crystal and the what I called the character plugins, because you could choose not to use it. You could put hardness in 0, or you could put hardness on 1.0, and it combined with sort of the use of everything else. But this is why this algorithm can't be part of like a purist calculation, is in the middle of the saturation curve, you hear a distortion point. And if you heard a little sort of flangy thing like as it came in, that's because as the sine hits that saturation point, it's intersecting it at places in the wave that separate out and get closer to being the frequency of the waveform. So it's acting like a kind of flangy overtone. Like if you put a small tick noise on this wave at exactly the top, that's going to be along the lines of the waveform. But if you put two of them, that would be double if it's exactly halfway. And if it's intersecting at spaces that go between exactly, according to the wave, and twice, it's going to cause a strange flanchy effect, which I don't know, that maybe I should make that as a tone shaper too. But point being, people don't necessarily want that in their audio, so use it with care. You can use this, And it's the sort of thing, here's empty pictures again, and we'll show you that same point. You go from clean to a little grungier. Now that said, there are uses for using weird, funny distortions and characteristics. Like you might have a track in which you're tuning the distortion so a particular drum or something like that tends to sit at the same place in the waveform will get an extra little tiz of that point where it crosses the threshold. Like if you sit your snare drum always goes right up to here, and you set the point of the distortion coming in at there, you're doing a really unusual little sculpting of the sound. Basically, if you love just twiddling with a dial to come up with the perfect little tonality, or you're moving it around and searching for the perfect little tonality, this might be right up your alley. It might actually work pretty good for you. But maybe it's a bit of a love it or hate it plugin, or maybe it's just too much of a tone shaper to qualify with some of the more minimalist stuff that I do. Now, Crystal is free, and it's audio unit and 3 different kinds of VST, Mac, Linux, and Windows. And obviously, I hope you like it. This is one of those ones where rather than being some strange arcane little thing, this is prone to people who are doing like mastering to exactly 0 dB or whatever, or clipping of various kinds. And they're trying to get a certain kind of slam and sort of roar and power out of their audio. So they want some sound characteristics to be tacked onto everything. You know, for some of you, this is going to be great. For some of you, this is going to be the biggest, coolest discovery ever. And for some folks that are not into things like little points here that I demonstrated with the sine wave, you might want to steer clear of this one. This one sounds like it's the kind of thing where people are running through, I don't know, old Mackie boards or whatever, because they're like, the way that I smash this board and overload the op amp right here makes it sound absolutely perfect. You know, that you can play with that a lot with this, and the other character ones are going to be coming as well. So you get different choices out of those and different tonalities out of those. Yeah, it's sort of a crowd pleaser style-y plugin. As such, December's been interesting because the Patreon took a bit of a rest, given that a lot of people needed to buy presents for their families or whatever. And I encourage that. That sounds fine. So we're good. I'm not in any danger. Everything is fine. However, if you add this to your permanent thing and it's the best, most awesomest plugin you've ever had, you could jump on the Patreon and sign up for like $50 a year, assuming that this is one of the ones that you would have bought if I had been selling it for $50. Full support. You get all the source code and all the different versions and no DRM and pretty much everything that you could hope to have. Doing it that way does not protect the developer, but I always did it that way anyhow, so no big change there. I don't think it's going to get back to where it's an increase month over month for December, because it's December 30th, and so it's already kind of too late, but it's all fine. It's all good. And I'm continuing to work, and as always, I'm hoping to find that expanding larger audience, because I'd much rather do that than start hitting people up for like more money or start putting out things that you can't have unless you spring for it. I don't like that very much. I'm also doing some interesting work on stuff like I have an idea for a Eurorack module that I'm going to try to make, and these ideas could end up with me needing to get boxes or chips or things like that. But it'll also give me fun things to do. I might need to add another day a week of live streaming, and where Monday I answer questions and Tuesday I do sort of music jams. And if I remember to record them, they go up on the SoundCloud at 2496. I might add another day for like hacking with the soldering iron and building stuff, because the possibilities of that are becoming really good. However, I think that's about enough out of me for the moment. So I hope you enjoy Crystal. I'd love it if you jump on the Patreon, because like I'm doing reasonably okay. There's stuff that I don't have, like healthcare. Thank goodness I've gotten over that flu thing that I had for a while. I understand people are worried about Patreon deplatforming me. That's not going to happen. What I do, that's not going to happen. And I think that they're just as good of a payment processor as Kagi ever was. Kagi still owes me $800. Patreon has never refused to pay me money. So, I don't know, I still like them. And they are the finest shopping cart that one could possibly have. And they never were a place where you go and find people. I go and find people by putting out plugins. Enough about that. If people want to talk about that whole issue, they can catch up with me on Monday, and I'd be more than happy to talk about it. But for the time being, I would like people to jump on the Patreon, because that's what I use to get paid. It's much more effective than something like trying to do PayPal with a bunch of one-at-a-time payments. It doesn't really work out very well, and it's not reasonable to do it in really small amounts either. Anyways, I'm going to head off and put up this video and then upload Crystal. And though I have shown you why this is maybe not the most optimal sound quality thing in terms of being able to hear some of these transition points, it does give you the capacity to do stuff that you just wouldn't be able to do otherwise, in terms of dialing in the amount of this and what that does to the sound. So you might find that that is exactly what you needed, and if so, I hope you like it. And I'll talk to you later, and maybe see some of you on Monday or Tuesday. Bye-bye.